Good evening all, and welcome. A house is a secure space, not just for our objects, but for our mind, which, as you can imagine, starts deteriorating very quickly the moment someone breaks in. So I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. In 2015, I was living with my then boyfriend. I was 18 at the time, living in a very sketchy apartment building in a not so good neighborhood. When I say sketchy, I mean crack house type sketchy. You'd find anything from alcoholics, severely mentally ill people to drug dealers and addicts living in these apartments, and the police were called to the property a few times a week. They even drove by just to check for safety reasons. There was an incident once during the night. One of the neighbors knocked on a door and my boyfriend went to open it up while I was asleep. One of the neighbors, an addict who happened to be severely schizophrenic, was at the door, and he barged into the apartment and threatened my boyfriend. Fortunately, he managed to calm him down and got him out of the apartment. For reasons like this, we brought a live security camera that we installed at our door and also connected to our TV so that we could easily check who was there. Everything was fine for a few weeks, until this one night. My boyfriend's best friend was sleeping over this weekend. We were all sleeping. I guess it was around 3 to 4 a.m. at the time when I woke up to someone ringing the doorbell. The camera was connected to the TV, but there was also a small screen attached to the door that I could activate to see who was outside. Since everyone was sleeping in the living room, I walked into the hallway to check on the small screen instead of turning on the TV. When I pressed the button, I saw two guys wearing hoodies looking at the camera. I paused for a second because I didn't fully understand what was going on. Not until they looked at each other, nodded, and then one of the guys reached his hand towards the camera and ripped it out, making the screen go black. I stood there for about 5 seconds before I realized what had happened. I ran back to the living room and shook my boyfriend awake, almost yelling, while also whispering, "Quick, get up! Someone just stole your camera!" He darted up and ran outside, didn't even bother putting on a shirt or shoes. All the noise woke up his buddy. Naturally, according to him, later on, he saw a guy running away into a wooded area, so he chased after him. What he didn't know was that I saw two guys and not just one. Well, I think the guy who ran away was just the distraction, because about a minute after he ran out, I heard someone entering the hallway. I froze in absolute terror. My buddy noticed that and sprinted to the door, separating the hallway of the living room. And the conversation went something along the lines of, "Oh, is Jason here? No, he isn't. Oh, could I come inside and sit for a minute? I don't think that would be appropriate since he isn't here. Oh, but I could go in and wait for him until he gets back. That's a no. Please leave." "Just for a minute?" "No, leave." He left. Buddy came in with a shocked but also frightened expression on his face. Both of us were in awe about what happened. My boyfriend came back 5 minutes later and told us about the unsuccessful chase. Both me and my buddy were terrified as he started telling us what happened while he was outside. My boyfriend said he only saw one guy outside when he had the time to process the situation. My theories were, A, they stole their camera as a distraction so my boyfriend would chase him while guy number 2 raided the apartment while he was out, or B, they knew I was there, but the buddy was not, and they stole the camera to lure him out so the others would walk in and either rob the place, assault me, or both. Both of these options are likely, the first one more than the other. The reason I also suspect the second theory is because most of the neighbors knew that I lived there with him. Many of them had seen me leaving and entering the apartment, and many of them occasionally said hi to me in passing, so most of the neighbors knew about me as well. I'm only 5 foot, quite small and an easy target. Fortunately, I'll never know what could have happened that night. I don't know how that night would have gone down if my boyfriend's best friend hadn't been there. If I wasn't a target to begin with, I definitely would have been one if that guy walked in and saw me alone. I think whatever guardian angel placed Buddy there that night. Everyone I've told this story to told me that I'm being paranoid and probably wouldn't have gotten hurt, but I don't believe them. They weren't in that situation. Nobody plans for a break-in without malicious intent to begin with, so I don't doubt for a second that I wouldn't have been caught in the middle of it had we been alone. It started when I went on vacation for a few days about a year ago in November. I came back, and the back door that leads into the stairs to the basement was unlocked. I had a roommate called Alex, who didn't come very often because she practically lived with her girlfriend, and I assumed that she had just forgotten to lock the door. We mostly use this door because it's closer to the side of the house that we park on. I let the dogs outside and then make sure to lock the door and go to bed. 3 a.m. hits, and the dogs wake up and start pacing like they're nervous and are acting weird. I calm them down and go back to sleep. Then they go insane at around 4, and I decide to let them out. I go to the back door, and the door is slightly open. I freak out and call Alex. She's let friends crash in the basement before, but she usually says something, and says that she hasn't had anyone over. I decide at this point it's probably best to have a weapon for protection. I check out the basement, grab a bat as well, and make sure one of the dogs comes with me. I turn on the lights and notice that there's a blanket that we keep on the back of a couch laying on the floor, and the throw pillows are both on one end and have an indenting where it looks like someone had been laying. I hear the laundry room, and I see the washer and dryer have both been used. There were clothes that were in the dryer now on top of it, and the laundry detergent bottle was also opened. As I'm heading back upstairs, I notice that the spare keys that we kept by the back door are gone. I call Alex to tell her what I found, and she decides to come over. She checks out her stuff and finds nothing missing, so she opts to just change the locks, as she owns the house so she can do this. A week or so passes, and as I'm waking up to what sounds like creaking coming from the attic, I think nothing of it, and just get up and start my night, as I'm a night shift worker. As I'm leaving, I happen to notice that the cover on the whole of the attic looked a bit crooked. I freaked out. I messaged Alex and told her what happened, and she says she will look into it when she gets back from work herself. While I'm at work, I get a text from Alex letting me know she didn't find anything off, and I'm probably still just paranoid from the other night. She says that since the locks were all changed, there's no way someone could have gotten in without breaking something. I ended up moving out after a year. She was having her girlfriend move in with her, and I was tired of being in that house. It became a regular thing that the door would be unlocked, and I always heard sounds coming from up above. I would occasionally notice that the cover to the attic had been moved as well. I also regularly found things would move around in the basement, and I never went down there without a dog with me. It took a few months in the new place to be able to sleep soundly again. I never heard anything from Alex since. However, I was asked to come over to let the dogs out while she was out of town one time, and the door was unlocked when I got there. She texted me that day complaining that I didn't know how to lock the door, and I told her that I locked it, but she insisted that I was pranking her. That's all I know. We live in a court in an upscale neighborhood in a large city in the US. Our court faces the expressway, and directly across from our house is a PG&E campus that has a pretty good open field that you can cut through to reach the streets and exit the neighborhood and get back onto the expressway. My parents were out at a concert and my sister was at home, and it was about 7:30 p.m. when I decided to head to my boyfriend's house, who lives 5 minutes away. Now, before I left, I had this weird nagging feeling that I need to leave our living room light on, as well as the porch lights. This is important for later. So I left them on, got in my car and drove to my boyfriend's house. An hour later, I get a notification on my phone that the Ring camera that is positioned at our front porch went off. I immediately knew something was wrong, because I knew no one was supposed to be home for a while. So I opened up the app and didn't see anything, and I'm waiting for the video to populate and see a guy in a black hoodie walk up to our porch, knock on the door, then moving away from the porch into the dark. Now, the way our camera is positioned makes it difficult to see his face, but my dad was adamant that guy had a mask on. About a minute after that, I get notified again, and it shows the guy walking back up to the door, knocking a bit louder, then moving away from the porch again. At this point, I knew it wasn't a prank, so I let off the siren through the app, hoping it would deter him. But when I didn't see him in the camera, I knew he had gone through the backyard, so I called the cops. The way the dispatcher was talking to me, it almost seemed like she thought it was a false alarm, but I was insistent that someone was trying to break in. She asked me to drive back to my house, and once I get there, to call them back. I feel like unless I called them back, they had no intentions of sending a cop to check on things. My boyfriend and I drive up to my house and don't pull up in the driveway, but park across from my house and turn off my car lights. I had left my sister's window blinds open, thank God, and kept looking at the window from my car, as I knew that it was the only way to see into the house, and dialed the cops again. 30 seconds into the call, I noticed flashlights through the window, and I tell the dispatcher. I initially thought it could have been a car driving from the other side of the house, but that thought was shot within 10 seconds when I saw the silhouette of a man looking through the window. The moment I saw the silhouette, I yelled into the phone, "Someone's in my house. Please hurry." The dispatcher told us to drive out of the court and park a bit away for safety while we wait for the cops. About a minute or two of us sitting in the car and checking behind us, my boyfriend yelled, "I see him walking ahead." And we see a guy in a black hoodie, holding a bag, fast walking down the street to our right and hiding behind the shadows of a corner house. We later put two and two together, and we think he left my house, cut through the PG&E grassy area, and tried to escape down the street, not knowing my car was parked there. I saw him and shined my high beams on him, so he knew I saw him, and at that point he began running towards a parked SUV that was parked in front of us the entire time. He got in the car and immediately turned it on and started driving. At that point, adrenaline kicked in for me, and I floored it while trying to catch up with him, while the dispatcher and my boyfriend are telling me to stop driving and park because it isn't safe to chase after him. 10 seconds after we park and the SUV is turning right, I see a cop behind us and immediately rolled down my window and gestured to the cop that that's the guy that's driving ahead of us, and he floored it to catch up with him. The cop came back and told me that he missed him and didn't see in which direction the guy fled, but drove back to my house and were met by 5 more cops and a K9 unit, and a helicopter hovering over the whole valley in search for him. Turns out the guy broke through my parents' window and focused his attention on their room and stole thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, including my parents' wedding jewelry, as well as my grandparents' and aunt's jewelry. My aunt passed away from cancer over 10 years ago. When he reached mine and my sister's room, is when I had pulled up to the house because he's rummaging through a bit of our stuff, but absolutely nothing was stolen from our rooms. The cops believed that I bought myself time to get to the house by leaving the lights on, because he took extra time to ensure no one was home, and that gave me time to pull up to my house and deter him before he stole more. They still haven't caught the guy, but I guess a house down the street from ours was broken into hours before ours was. Maybe 10 minutes away from ours. The cops believed the guy tried to blend into the neighborhood for that extra hour, so he bought himself time for the cops to stop searching so that he could move on. There were numerous reports of suspicious SUVs parked with its lights off in other surrounding neighborhoods just sitting there, which is why the cops believed he was trying to blend in and buy time. To the person who broke into our home and stole my parents' priceless jewelry and made us now live in fear, let's not meet again. This happened 8 years ago, during the summertime. I was at my mum's house, but she barely lived there anymore, as she spent most of her time at her boyfriend's, and my sister was very often left alone. I was a student in another city, but I came back in my house during these holidays. I was 19 and my sister was 16 at the time. Our house had 2 floors, a living room and a kitchen on the first, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on the second. The kitchen and living room had 2 door windows opening to a large terrace. From the terrace, you could go into the backyard by some stairs. We didn't really use the ground floor as it was very dark due to the small windows, and it was basically a garage and office just to do our homework. It's summer and very hot. I just discovered Game of Thrones and had 2 seasons to watch. Every evening, I took my laptop, made myself comfortable on the terrace near the kitchen, and watched an episode. My garden was surrounded by a U-shaped building, so you could see my terrace very well, as well as my garden from the balconies. Some workmen were there for a few days, and had been working late, so I often saw them as I watched my series. They were minding their own business, and I did the same, and didn't think much of it. One morning I was sleeping late, and my sister woke me up with a whisper. "There's a man in the house." I was half naked because of the heavy heat of that summer. I stood up, perfectly awake now, grabbed a shirt and went downstairs practically running. I know this is a dumb thing I do, a half-naked, helpless young woman, but I'm very protective of my little sister, and I didn't feel any fear at this point. I went down to the kitchen and couldn't find a sharp object, so I took a fork, and when I asked her where she saw him, she told me she was watching TV in the living room, and because the windows were open, she saw a man in the reflection standing just behind her. She jumped off the couch to find herself in front of him. He was a tall man in his late 30s. She had no chance in a fight. The guy had one of his feet on the first step to the second floor where I was sleeping. She shouted, "Who are you?" to receive no reply, and just walked quietly back into the kitchen where the door window was wide open, and took the stairs back up to the garden. As soon as I heard that, I ran into the back garden with my harmless weapon to the gate in our front garden. I even went in the street looking for him. I'm sure that if I had found him, I would not have been so brave anymore, and would have maybe peed myself. But there was no one. Suddenly I realized my sister was still alone in the house, and perhaps he'd gone back. I returned to the kitchen, searched the house, but it turns out we were alone. That's when I realized my computer was missing. My sister told me that the guy didn't have anything in his hands when he left. That was the scariest part, because it meant he was either in the house for quite some time before he took the laptop and came back to do whatever he planned to do, or there was someone else there. I got dressed, and my sister and I went to the nearby police station. I'm very angry with the policeman. She was a minor, so stayed with her. and she told them everything and described the guy with a lot of detail. They asked if we could recognize him, and she said that, without a doubt, she could. They said, "You know, it's highly unlikely that we find him. You should be thankful that you and your sister didn't have anything worse happen." Almost like she needed to be more scared. When we got back home, she was afraid, and I was angry with the loss of my expensive laptop that I needed for art school and had all my pictures in it. We sat there at the terrace and spoke about what happened and how lucky we were that she saw the man before he came upstairs. This is when I noticed the workmen weren't there anymore. From my street, no one can even know we have a backyard and another entrance to the house. My sister told me he was acting like he knew a bit of the house. Maybe it wasn't the first time, and we didn't even notice he had been there before. I'm now certain it was one of those men working in that neighborhood balcony who'd been watching me that broke in that morning. From that day, we double-locked the doors and slept in the same bed for weeks. I am an 18-year-old male, 6'1" and 190 pounds. I live in Seattle and work at a local grocery store, as my father insisted on me getting a job amidst coronavirus and grocery stores are the few places hiring nowadays. I work at 5 a.m. and wake up at 4 a.m. I don't mind it because I get off early. It's still dark when I arrive at the store, and I always have to call the store to ask for the produce workers to let me in. As I was walking up to the door, I see an average-looking man, probably in his late 30s. He doesn't work at my store, and he was clearly tweaking out, moving around in crazy motions. Perhaps he was on something, and it was common to find needles in the bathroom of the store. As I was waiting for the door to be opened, he was facing me about 8 feet away, not looking at me, but past me. He was chanting some weird stuff, something like, "Satan will come, Satan knows." He kept repeating those lines. I was just standing at the door like, what is this dude on? Someone let me in already. Nothing else strange happens at work that day, and I get off at 9 a.m. as I'm the only worker who worked a 4-hour shift that day. As I'm driving home, I get a call and the ID said it was from a nearby city. I answer, and I can literally only hear a guy breathing. I'm just sitting there thinking this is some corny prank, since the audio was playing through the speaker of my car. His breathing was amplified, so I'm not sure if it was intentional. I read one time that if someone keeps you on the phone for long enough, they can get your IP address. I'm not certain of this though. He then says my full name in a tone of a question, but also weirdly strange and excited kind of way that made me feel tremendously uneasy. This was very stupid of me to confirm, but I said, "Yeah, who's this?" Then he pauses and hangs up. I realized a few hours later he sounded exactly alike to the satanic dude from the morning, except sober. I get paranoid fairly easily, but this was a red flag and sent chills down my spine. I tried to call the number back, but as you imagine, it was disconnected. The next day I arrive at work with no troubles and leave at 9 a.m. I get home at about 9:20 and see my father's car in the driveway, as he is usually home at this time. The front door to my house was unlocked. I shouldn't think anything of this because my dad was at home, right? I walk in, take off my shoes, and call out for my dad because I brought in his mail. Before I explain this next part, you need to understand that many noises people hear are misidentified as something it truly is not, or their mind is playing games with them, or it's just the house making noises. But there was a very specific noise that my parents' bed frame makes because it's wood, when someone is rolling around on it. I know this sound very well because my room is right next to theirs, and my dad's is an extremely light sleeper. And anytime I drop something or make a relatively loud sound, I can hear him rolling on his bed as I disturbed him. I call out for my dad as I'm walking up the stairs, and there's no response, only the noise of that bed frame moving. I later that day rolled around in the bed to confirm the noise and heard that you need a significant amount of weight on the bed to cause that sound. This was when I got scared as hell, because my dad wakes up very early and there's no way he was taking a nap at 9:30 a.m. I'm already at the top of the stairs at this point, so I burst into my room and closed my door and listened through our paper-thin walls, and I genuinely heard someone whispering, and then the springs releasing as if someone was sitting up on the edge and then stood up. If he was whispering, that means there could potentially be 2 people in the house, and I could be in real danger. I instinctually grabbed my dresser and dragged it in front of my door. That thing weighs about 150 pounds, and it took me a little while to drag it in front. My heart was pounding. I was worried that the intruder or intruders would catch on to what I was doing and break through the door before I had the chance to do it. I slammed the dresser down in front of my door to not waste any more time. No one was getting through that door. I felt slightly more relaxed and called my dad. I started to get nervous because he didn't answer, but he sometimes went on walks around the neighborhood at this time. Just as I tried to call him, I saw him walking up the street from our bedroom window and shouted that it wasn't safe for him to come into the house. At first, he laughed it off and then proceeded up the driveway, as nothing like this has ever happened. I repeated myself, but this time I screamed at him. Now he knew I was serious. He could see the fear in my eyes. He stepped back a few feet and asked what the hell was going on, and I felt I didn't really have time to explain and just told him to wait. Once I confirmed my father was safe, I dialed 911, and the intruders next to me must have heard it, because when I got off the phone they ran down the stairs. I was worried for my dad at this point because he was just outside, and I had to move the dresser again from my door as I was in a panicked state, and left my room and ran down the stairs to see nothing except my dad, who was still confused at this point about the back door being wide open. The cops got there 12 minutes later and came up with nothing. No evidence of forced entry, literally nothing besides the wide open back door and someone's mud tracked in the house, which really annoyed me. Could the man whispering have been the one who was talking to Satan the other day? How did he know my name on the phone? Can someone track you if they know your number and full name? Were these people trying to take me? This only happened a while ago, and I've been scared ever since, worrying they might return. I also have sleep paralysis and it's gotten a lot worse lately, and if you had it before, you know it sucks. So, that's my story. Feel free to leave a comment and write a note about your thoughts. This happened last night and the night before. A little backstory first. I live in a not too safe area. The block I'm on is okay, but if you walk down my street a block or two, you get to a very sketchy area. When we leave the house, we head up a side street that gets us away from trouble. Like I said, my block isn't bad. We all get along here. Most people on this block are related to each other. All but for my household. But even though we are strangers to the neighbors, they're nice to us. The people right next door have dogs as well as a few other households. Again, we are the odd ones out of the departments as well. The dogs only bark when someone is on our block that doesn't live here. I've always felt safer because of the dogs. I live in a home converted into a duplex. When you walk in the front door, you are in the entryway, and then across the entryway you see my apartment door. Then if you go up the stairs beside my door, you will find the door to the second apartment. The front door to the house has no lock mechanism at all. It's so tenants cannot lock each other out of the house. We can only lock the doors of our apartments. So when you come into the entryway, a motion sensing light comes on. No one is currently living upstairs. So at this time it's just me and my husband living in the place. 2 nights ago my husband was in bed. I was up, watching TV. I was all relaxed and thinking about going to bed. It was nearly 1 a.m. and suddenly I get this overwhelming, uncomfortable feeling. I feel hot and sick in my stomach, and I had the intrusive thought that I needed to go check the apartment door to make sure it was locked. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't, so I resort to getting up to look. Just as I got there, I heard someone open the screen door on the outer house door. I looked and the door was locked, and then I heard the actual door to the house open and someone step into the entryway. I was terrified. I know no one who lives upstairs, and my landlord said he would let me know if someone was moving. You don't get visitors this late or without a phone call first, and also with this pandemic and social distancing, no one should be coming over anyway. Then I heard a click. I recognized the click as the sound of the motion lights. It's turned on. Then I hear a male voice go, "Aw, crap," and the sound of someone running out the house. I was terrified and stood there trying to process what happened. From the time I heard the screen door until a solid minute after the person ran out, I stood there frozen. The neighborhood dogs were barking their heads off all night, and they only do that if someone they don't know is around. I think that someone who didn't know that the house is a duplex attempted to let themselves in. The light, which is way too bright for that tiny entryway, came on and scared them away. I woke up my husband and called the police, and they said that since the person was not trying to get into my apartment exactly, they weren't coming out. The best they could do was super comforting, which was drive by the apartment a few times. Great. Last night, I was up late again. The dogs were barking like crazy. At a little after midnight, I heard a noise. I mute the TV and realize someone is pounding on the outer house door. Not my apartment door, thank goodness. I was freaked out. I wanted to go in and wake up the husband, but thought better of it. There's a window beside the outer house door where he was knocking, and that window is our bedroom window. Because my husband was asleep and the lights were on in the living room, but off in the bedroom, I thought if I opened the door, the person standing out on the porch hammering on the door would see the light, and therefore know someone was there, and I was afraid to let whoever was out there know I was home. I sat here for over 10 minutes of banging. It was not stopping. I thought maybe it was the police because of the call I made the night before, so I called the police and told them what was happening, and asked if it could be police at my door. He looked into it and said that whoever it wasn't the police, as well as not to open the door. He said he was sending police out, and if someone was still banging on the door, they would walk to them, and he said he would call when he knew what was going on. The banging stopped about 5 minutes after hanging up with the police dispatcher, but I never got a phone call, so I don't know if the police did ever show. Tonight the dogs were already barking, and I've been barking for the past hour. My husband decided that I'm going to bed early and he's staying up. I doubt I'll sleep anyway. I made him promise that no matter what, if he hears something, not to unlock our front door. If there are any more shenanigans tonight, well, I don't even want to know. I live with my mum in a house that we bought a year and a half ago, but only moved in 6 months ago because all of the renovations that needed to be done to it were quite demanding. Often when it was in the reno stage, I would go over there at night and hang out, and almost every time I was there, I would hear these creepy creaky noises. They freaked me out, especially since the renovations included adding a whole wing to the house, which made it very easy for unwanted guests to enter. However, I know that houses make sounds, so I tried to forget about it. One late night during the reno phase, I went over to the second house and punched in the garage code. You can hear the garage open from pretty much anywhere in the house if you're not making too much noise. As the garage began to open, I heard loud sounds like pots and pans being banged together, although we didn't have any in the house at the time. To be honest, I was terrified, just standing there trying to decide what I was hearing and what I should do about it. Ultimately, I decided to close the garage and go back home. I've not heard anything like this before or since. After this, I only went to the house if I had someone with me, and a few months later my mum moved in. Fast forward to present day. The creepy house noises that I heard in the Reno phase have been diminished, but I still hear them almost exclusively at night, as I regularly stay up late. They sound like someone's accidentally knocking their elbow against the door. Nothing to be too concerned about, but I always sleep with my fan on because I sleep in late, and the white noise blocks out any potential sounds that might scare me. Last night I wanted to conserve energy, so I didn't turn it on. I was laying in bed, lights off, when I heard what sounds like my basement door closing. It was 5 a.m, so definitely not my mum. I continued to hear what sounds like shuffling noises coming down the hall towards my room. My mum's bedroom is on the other side of the house, so she wouldn't hear this. I dialed 911, but didn't press call trying to rationalize. After a few minutes of hearing nothing, I turned on my fan but kept my phone turned on the phone app. 911, still dialed. Eventually I went to sleep. I have foster kittens that sleep in a dog crate near my mum's room. This morning one of them was acting peculiar, very scared, hiding, and hissing whenever I went near him. I've had him for a week, and he's only exhibited his behavior in the first day. And he was fine when I put him to bed last night. His brother is a lot more laid back than him, and I haven't noticed a change in his behavior. I'm not entirely sure I would, since he's better with strangers. Tonight I'm going to put tape on the attic and basement doors, and I sincerely hope they're there when I wake up tomorrow. I haven't told my mum my concerns because I have a history of drug abuse. Although I'm sober now, and although I've never had any hallucinations or delusions, she jumps to conclusions. I just went to the room that's adjacent to the room with the attic to grab my charger, and swore I heard something move. I had my kittens in both hands, so I put them in the crate and grabbed a weapon and went back, but I heard nothing, and I was too scared to do anything, but I'm in the other room and keep hearing sounds. The next morning, I spent half the night in the room besides the hallway which contains the attic and basement door, listening, weapons at the ready. At around 1 a.m, I heard what I thought was unmistakably someone moving around in the other room. I dialed 911 but didn't call, scooped up my kittens and weapon and knocked on my mum's bedroom door. This woke up my dog, who has a bad sense of sight and smell, startles very easily, and that's why I don't rely on him, who started to bark very loudly. I told my mum I thought someone was in the house. She walked the dog around our house perimeter while I cleared the rooms in the hallway except the basement and attic, but nothing. I got the step ladder and climbed to the attic after my mum definitely confirmed it was empty of humans. We then checked the basement. It's an unfurnished crawl space that leads to a door on our porch. We didn't check the crawl space. I put tape on the basement door, but I stayed up all night in the living room with the lights and TV on loud so the hypothetical person wouldn't think I'm sleeping and sneak around. I have my brother and father coming over tomorrow, so I'm just going to get them help me out with things. Just so you know, I live in a smaller town, so there's no non-emergency number I can call. I'm almost convinced it could just be animals, but I'm going to put flour on the basement stairs as well. The tape on the door was undisturbed, but I've heard those sounds. Having someone live in your house is so uncommon, but as I mentioned, My mind tends to jump to the worst conclusion when you don't have a lot of evidence. Hey guys, it's Morton. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. If you did, you know what to do. If anyone has any more poop stories, thank you so much for sending yours in. Everyone who has already, please feel free to send those over to me. I nearly have enough to make a whole video, but I am going to need a bit more contributions from your part. So, if something embarrassing and creepy has happened to you, feel free to forward it to me. I look forward to reading your stories. Alright then guys, as always a huge thanks to my lovely patrons whose names can be seen on screen, but for now I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.